This is EJ Chats with the NAACP, and EJ stands for Environmental Justice Chats. So this is where we will have an opportunity to speak with people who are very much invested in the environmental and climate justice space, where we can learn and we can become educated. We're very, very, very excited to have our Congresswoman, Bonnie Watson Coleman, as our special guest tonight. Just to introduce myself, I'm Marcus Sibley. I'm the chairman of the New Jersey State Conference NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. I will be joined soon by our subcommittee chair, Keith Voos. We love this work. We absolutely understand what it means to be a part of the NAACP. We understand the history and the legacy that comes with representing an organization that's literally been around for over 100 years. So our motives and passion and motivation for the last year since I've been the chair has been to get to the tables. We need to be where decisions are made, because the NAACP represents the moral compass of our environment. We need to be there to make sure people are staying honest. Yes, there have been historic harms. Yes, there have been organizations that haven't done the right thing. But if we only dwell on the past, we won't ever get to the point where we need to get to, where we're able to really help our people. We need to build a capacity so that we can help all of our municipalities all throughout New Jersey. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a second and bring in our subcommittee chair, Keith Voos. Here at the New Jersey State Conference NAACP, we have divided our Environmental and Climate Justice Committee into 3 subcommittees. We have Housing, Parks, and Open Spaces, who's chaired by Reverend Diane Hawkins. We have HEAP, and Keith will explain what HEAP stands for. And then we also have Legislative and Advocacy, which is chaired by Alex Bland. So we try to get a lot done, and we've divvied it up so that we can make sure that we are always present in the important matters going around our state.
Good evening, Congresswoman Watson Coleman. Pleasure to meet you. I officially have the title as the chair of the HEAP subcommittee. I honestly consider myself to be a co-chair with the other 5 members. It's a wonderful committee. HEAP stands for Health, Education, Environment, and Pollution. If you think about that for a moment, you see it's a big umbrella, but we do the best we can with it. We're a 6-member committee, very, very committed people. We have representatives from South Jersey, Central Jersey, and Northern Jersey. We have a diverse committee. We have women, we have men, we have white folks like me, we have Black folks. And so a good diversity of people, and we are very much committed to the cause of environmental justice in New Jersey. I feel, as a white ally and a member of the NAACP, I feel very honored and very privileged to be taking part in this environmental justice work. I am glad that Dr. Robert Bullard is still alive to see that the work that he started so many decades ago, the so-called father of environmental justice, is still alive to see that environmental justice has finally entered the mainstream of the American conversation. Finally. It's about time, and it's very, very gratifying to be engaged in this work. And so I am here, as we are all here tonight, to learn about legislative efforts at the federal level and how we at the NAACP here in New Jersey can contribute to the success of those legislative efforts. Thank you very much.
And I thank you, Keith. Keith is what we try to do. Congresswoman, we try our very best to remain active. So anytime there's a testimony, anytime that there's a hearing, Keith is one of the people, and we band together and we write statements constantly, because it's important and this is what we've understood. It's important that in the NAACP is at the table. We have definitely realized that within this last year, there have been a lot of opportunities that have come from the work that we've done. And that's why we have been continuously working to build our capacity, because there are many tables and those meetings happen at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m. And when you're a volunteer organization, it's very difficult to get people to those very important meetings. So we've been very fortunate to get grants to allow us to have people present at those meetings. So we're definitely absolutely appreciative to our partners that have made it possible for us to be at those tables. And I'd like to give a shout out to my employer. I work for the National Wildlife Federation. They have co-sponsored this event tonight. And I will speak later on about some of the wonderful things that on a national level that NWF is doing. But the correlation between what the NWF does and what NAACP does and what Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman is doing is cleaning up our environment, allowing us to have what we deserve, which is clean air. Our trees are pivotal. Our trees are the most important filter that we have in our environment. And when we have our urban environments, when you have asphalt everywhere, you don't have those trees. So that means a lot of those pollutants that we're inhaling, they're not being filtered out by the trees. So Congresswoman Watson Coleman has an act called the Shade Act. So let's just jump in right there, Congresswoman. Could you give us an overview of what the Shade Act entails and why it's important to our community?
Thank you. Thank you so much for convening us tonight. I want to just give a shout out to your president that I've known since he was a little tyke running around in our church, Richard. And I want to say that I've been blessed to be able to work with your national president as well. And I'm very excited about the NAACP and all the work that you all have been doing. I mean, historically, you've involved everyone, Black, white, any race or ethnicity, and of course, gender equality as well. And you're doing it now. And this is really a good time to be talking about the environment, because we've known for a long time that our communities have suffered from a lack of resources coming into our communities, lack of protection. We know that our children were experiencing high degrees of asthma. We even know that there have been health challenges to pregnant women and to newborn babies and to elderly people who live in our so-called communities, which were once defined as red line communities and which were intentionally underinvested in. And so the shade track, the shade tree bill, which basically is the it's got a whole fancy name. Let me get it entirely right. It's Saving Hazardous and Declining Environments Act, known as the Shade Act. And what it did was we recognized that in communities that didn't have trees in particular, that the degrees, it was hotter, that there was no filtering of the pollutants, that they were dry communities because there were no trees creating water through its leaves and turning into vapor, that the accelerated heat index was problematic in terms of heat strokes and other kinds of heat related issues, that overexposure to the heat created physical problems as well as emotional problems, and how you feel about your community, what you see. And so we introduced the Shade Act, and we're very happy to see that many components of the Shade Act have been incorporated in the Build Back Better agenda that President Biden has advanced, that we in the House of Representatives have already passed, and is now being debated, negotiated, and hopefully freed up and voted on in the Senate and sent on to the president. And so I look forward tonight to having our conversations, not only about shade and the overheating of our communities, but the impact of policies back in the middle of the 21st century, the whole building of highways and cutting our communities off, the impact of pollution from transit vehicles, from gas and other pollutants. I want to talk about the fact that we are entitled to clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, as well as mobility to get us in and out of our communities. All of those are linked to policies that were once in place. Even our housing stock is linked to those policies that were put in place and carried on for so long. And we seem to be right now in both a troubling environment, but an enlightened environment as well. And so we're talking about the Build Back Better agenda, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. What does it mean to our communities? What should we hope to get from those investments that are going to be made? And there's billions of dollars we're talking about. It's not just jobs, it's education, it's climate resiliency, it's making our homes climate resilient, it's cleaning our water services and cleaning our air. And so thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion. I'd like very much to be able to do some Q&A with people. Perhaps I can enlighten them a little bit more on what's in those various bills.
Yeah, and fortunately, we've had quite a few people submit questions ahead of time, so we definitely have them queued up. But before we jump into that, I mean, you were touching on how these systems all throughout our environment. There's a correlation between policy and racism and white supremacy, and we have this movement now where environmental justice is like the hot topic right now. But how do we get more people to realize the historic context to how things got here in the first place, so that they can then make that connection to why their voice is so needed right now? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we're having this discussion tonight. This is a vehicle to remind people of what happened in our past that affects our current situation and can harm us in the future if we don't do some course correction. I mean, we can go back to, the decision to create a whole highway system that cut our communities off from one another. I mean, literally, if it didn't destroy a whole community, it went right in the middle of it. And that how pollution from cars and buses and other modes of transportation affected us disproportionately, because at the same time, we were living in and near these areas that were seriously disinvested in. So there weren't trees for shade and filtering. There weren't decent housing stock opportunities because people just didn't invest in those redline communities. There was old infrastructure that was delivering water to our homes and to our schools.
Right.
So we found out that there's lead in the water that has an incredible impact on the cognitive growth, the emotional well-being of our children as well as our elderly. We look at the housing stock, how old it is, how much lead paint was on the walls that our children were, chipping at and eating, and the impact of it. And all of this came about because of intentional policy decisions that were made by people who didn't very much look like us, and there weren't very many of us that looked like this who were at the tables at the time, that either didn't care about our communities, certainly devalued them and devalued what could possibly happen to us. I mean, between disinvesting in us and the indigenous people,
Right.
there is a very stark and dark history here.
Absolutely.
But we're now at a juncture where we recognize that we have, for instance, a very failed physical infrastructure. So the bipartisan infrastructure bill was advanced. And we know that that's building bridges and broadband and fixing roads and things of that nature, and building some things here and there. And generally, the benefit didn't always accrue to us. But because there are more of us in those discussions while these bills are being developed and while these secretaries are coming before our respective committees to talk about them, we raise issues. What are your proposals for those communities that have been underrepresented or underinvested in? What are the checks and balance mechanisms to ensure that we don't go oops after the fact that this didn't happen, but that we can see it happening in real time and make the course corrections that are necessary? And so the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that hard infrastructure bill, is an important piece here because it's also got some climate protection and cleaning up our leaded water, as well as fixing our infrastructure and fixing our public transit. But we also needed that Build Back Better infrastructure plan, because it not only supported some of these initiatives as it related to making our communities healthier by investing in climate resilient innovations, grants that would come directly to our communities, but it also looked at the health in our communities. And so it created opportunities for greater health care. It looked at how do we get our communities healthily back into the workforce. And so it looked at child tax credits, making sure that our children are not living in impoverished situations, making sure that our women can get back into the workforce, things of that nature. Those two things, decreasing the cost of things like medicine and healthcare and early childhood education. Together, those two pieces of legislation I call our FDR moment without leaving blacks out.
Right.
It's very transformative.
Right.
And so there's even investments that are targeted to underinvest in communities like ours.
Right. And that's why, I mean, I really appreciate this conversation because for New Jersey State Conference NAACP, and again, we definitely have to give a shout out to Richard Smith, our state conference president, because he's very progressive and he's telling us we need to educate our people. We need to be forward thinking. So nothing we do will be possible without him saying, let's push the envelope. And one thing that we're absolutely being now, Congresswoman, is strategic. We're understanding that, you know, politics is chess. Like, you want something moved, you have to appeal to both sides. You have to be able to get people across the aisle to believe in what's important to you. So for us at the NAACP, like, we, on one end, our job is to make our community aware of what's important to us. But another tremendous piece is to be very aware of other pieces within legislation that may have importance to others. Because the reality is, a lot of people don't even care. They don't, like, you can't saying a Black life matters is a political statement for people. So if people don't think that Black lives matter, why would they care that our children have the 4th highest rate of asthma in the country in New Jersey? Like, they don't care. So our job is always to find out what are the other provisions that other people may care about. So the Build Back Better Act, and I'm going to put a link in the chat for more people to check it out. It's one of those very rare opportunities where people from literal all over the country, there's something to root for. So there's environmental justice pieces that you were just speaking to. There are many other provisions that even go into capping off some of these facilities that are polluting our environment, that are becoming Superfund sites. It's even funding to stop that. You know, a lot of things that traditionally we don't think about, but it impacts us because those fossil fuels impact our communities worse, always.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see, you know, outside of the aesthetics piece of having more trees, what do you see as the need for bringing trees with the Shade Act? What is the core? What will best resonate with the people of New Jersey, since this is where we are?
So trees clean our air. You know, they provide not only moisture for us, but they provide filters for us, and they provide shade, and we need all of those things. We have unnecessary deaths associated with a very high temperature communities where there's no protection, because there's just no trees, there's no shade, there's no getting away from it. Trees will help to block some of the rays from the sun that, absent any kind of shade tree, the heat that is created against the concrete and against the glass and all, you know, has a deleterious effect on our physical well-being. But even beyond our physical well-being, there are studies that said it even affects our emotional, our mental well-being. And, you know, we have to be up to the challenge of getting out there and working and supporting our families and thinking that we can thrive and survive and make headway. But if we're depressed, you know, or if we're emotionally down, it's very hard to get us up and out like we should. And so just planting more trees has a physical and emotional well-being to us individually and collectively to our communities. And then aesthetically, I mean, isn't it prettier to see a street that's lined with beautiful trees than it is just to see bare trees and wires and poles for, you know, for electricity and other things. Mm-hmm. So it has a variety of positive impacts on us.
As well as flooding, you know, as well as flooding, as was pointed out in the chat. Flooding is a tremendous issue in many of our towns, and anytime you remove trees to put up these different developments, you remove the barrier to stop the flooding, and that's a tremendous issue. I met with Congresswoman Cheryl recently, and she was speaking about how this is happening in Morristown, around a historic church, Bethel. There's a lot of construction around the church, and now the huge flooding issue. So this is happening all throughout our state. So it's like, so here's my question then. We know trees are aesthetically pleasing. We know trees are a filter. We know that trees help with flooding. Are there any opponents to wanting to bring trees? Like, can you speak to that? Or is there any skepticism about bringing trees or anything like that?
I have not heard any yet.
Okay,
it would seem to me to, you know, that it's kind of far-fetched for people to have a problem with that, even though they may have a problem with other things, you know. So I don't know that is an issue. I think if we have any kind of an issue, it's that getting legislation from the creation to the assignment to a committee, to a floor vote, to finding a Senate companion and getting it passed over there. So the process can be quite lengthy and very slow. The fact that many elements of the SHADE Act are already incorporated in the Build Back Better agenda, that doesn't seem to me to be one of the things that the Senate would be looking to negotiate out. And so hopefully, you know, the Senate's got a lot of arcane rules, but we're trying to get the Build Back Better bill dealt with in a budget reconciliation process, which means that we just need 51 votes to get it passed. We don't have to worry about the filibuster and getting the 60 votes in order to get it passed. We're 50-50 right now, and we've got the marvelous, incredible Vice President of the United States who is that 51st vote when she's needed to be that. But having it as part of the Build Back Better agenda, I think means that we could get a turnaround on it much faster than as a standalone bill. But I also think that a lot of the things in the Build Back Better agenda are good beginnings, and that we at least get these things on the table, and then we can build on them.
So with that being said, I mean, we have people tuning in and they're learning about the legislation. So how can people get involved? I mean, you mentioned the different steps. How can people assist along those ways? What are the what's a good strategy for members, constituents?
So for New Jersey right now, our two senators need to hear from all of our citizens and the NAACP across the state of New Jersey saying, hey, we support the Build Back Better bill and we're asking for your support. We hope that you're able to vote for this, and we'd like to see it this year as opposed to pushing it out to next year, which is a possibility now. It's December already. We could be conceivably doing this in January, but we need consistent outreach to our legislators to let them know that it's on our minds. We're not letting this go. We're not going to reach out to you one time, and if it doesn't happen, we're going to. So, and then as it relates to the larger NAACP community around the country, it's really important for them. Like, I know my senators are going to come on board. I know that New Jersey senators are progressive enough to come on board. But that's not the case all over the country. So, there are folks up in Maine and in Ohio and other places. They need to hear from NAACP members, the NAACP organization, and citizens that you've reached out to educate about how to advocate on behalf of our communities, how to advocate on behalf of the Build Back Better. And Build Back Better is just a huge agenda. I get very excited when I talk about it because I honest to God believe that it is transformative for our communities. It deals with our elderly to our little babies and everything in between, from childcare to healthcare to schools to jobs to protection to housing to building better housing, all of those things. And so people need to hear elected officials, even on the state level, when they're considering pieces of legislation, they need to hear from us constantly. I know my office, even when people know that I'm for something, I'm like, yeah, okay, but give me a call. Let me record that as one of, my constituents. We're saying this is very important. We want to make sure that you're on board, Congresswoman. Advocacy, our voice right now is vitally important in so many respects.
So could you give us insight on what methods have been most effective? Because there's phone calls, people use email, they'll use social media to tag their representatives. Sometimes people will go to the offices. Which strategy have you seen that has been most effective, or is there a most effective strategy?
All of the above. What they have to see is that there's a diverse interest, and that interest is manifested not only in diverse people, but in diverse platforms. And so there are demonstrations that take place in DC almost every day. I'm going to be involved in one on the 8th. There's their Washington office and there's their local office. They need to hear from you. They can hear from you on the phone. They can hear from you in emails. They can hear from you on Twitter or Instagram or whatever other ones that I have no idea exist today. And they can be tagged on your Facebook and other social media. The point is that we have to have a groundswell of conversation around the issues that are important to us. We can't afford not to be loud on those issues, from voting rights to civil rights to women's rights to environmental justice rights, all of those things. They need to know that there are loud, consistent, organized voices out here.
Right. And that's important. And I'm also curious when you say we need to be loud, like the best way to be loud is to have a lot of people with you. So I wanted to see from your experience, what are some of the common themes among groups that different groups from different walks of life can rally around? Like, can you
Okay.
speak to that from your experience?
Yeah. So remember when Donald Trump first got elected and he was going to eliminate the Affordable Care Act?
Hmm.
Okay. Do you remember the millions of people that demonstrated not only in this country, not only in Washington, D.C., but around the world in support of us?
Right.
And he had to back off of that.
Right.
So obviously, demonstrations organized around an issue that resonates with so many different people works. The whole issue of voting rights, that's not just Black folks' issue.
Right.
That's going to be people who have disabilities getting to the polls to vote, elderly people getting to the polls to vote. That's not just about our getting to the polls, because we've already shown you that when you put up obstacles in front of us, we're going to just knock them down and go vote.
Right.
But it's even more than just ensuring that we can get to vote. We got to make sure that folks aren't trying to take away the vote after the vote has been cast.
Right.
So we need to be educated on what really are the threats here, what really are the consequences to our inaction. And they need to hear from us, and they need to know that we're paying attention. I mean, we're going to have stuff in Georgia. Georgia's going to be very important.
Yes. Yes.
You know, not only is Stacey Abrams going to run for governor, you got Reverend Warnock is going to run for re-election. They're going to do everything they can to try to steal that. We've got to be vigilant. And so it is an issue of our being informed, our setting up opportunities to have conversations on a routine basis so that we stay in real time informed. And then we talk about the best way to respond to any given issue. But women's issues, women's rights, voting rights, gay and lesbian rights, everything is between the Supreme Court and the GOP on the state level. We're in for a very rigorous period.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah, so we are going to have to stay on our P's and Q's here.
Absolutely. And with that being said, I mean, one thing that we focus on quite often is the reality that we need to be, and this is where I want to tip my cap to you, because you're very loud on many different issues. You advocate in many different areas, and we see how beneficial that is. So one thing that the NAACP New Jersey State Conference does often is we try to get, especially in the environmental space, we try to get our partners to be vocal on social justice issues, because we don't see a difference between social justice and environmental justice. So it's like, how can you be quiet when there's police brutality and there's bills calling for transparency of police records, and we have some civilian complaint review board bills trying to get subpoena power? Like, how can we say that we're about the betterment of these communities if we're remaining silent on the things that are the immediate dangers? Like, yes, pollution is bad, but I got to worry about getting home at night, and I have to worry about surviving a traffic stop. So I guess, are you able to ever have conversations about social justice topics with your colleagues in Congress? Like, is there ever a space for those types of discussions?
Oh yeah, I belong to well, I'm a member of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Right. I mean, and I meant like across the aisle too. Like,
yeah. Well, I have to be perfectly honest with you. There's not a lot of talking across the aisle right now, because the Republicans have decided that they're not going to do anything but obstruct, and so they're going to be and they're going to be misinformers and perpetuators of big lies, and so there's very little desire to cooperate on the big things that we think are important: voting rights, housing rights, environmental rights, education, things of that nature, police reform. People, try to turn that into like, we want to defund the police. How absurd is that? But if that's the last voice that people hear, and that's the voice they hear over and over and over again. They translate that into the real threat when it is nowhere near a threat. On the environmental justice thing, I mean, New Jersey is like one of the 10 worst states when it comes to pipes that deliver water that have contaminants in them.
Exactly.
We've got to understand that, but other folks that need to understand that as well. The Build Back Better bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bill carve out money to deal with those underrepresented communities, those communities that have just been left out there floundering on their own. We need to know that, but we need to know who's with us and who's not with us, because we need to be able to articulate that. And so every platform is important. We're not going to always be able to pull together a million march, a million man's, a million women's march, or anything of that nature. But the consistency of the message is vitally important.
Absolutely. And we appreciate every single thing that you're saying, because what we're doing at the tables that we're at, like we sit on offshore wind coalition tables, we sit at water coalitions, and what we've been pushing for ad nauseum is, where's the specificity in the language to make sure that it will get to the people who you say that it's going to get to? Because we've seen this before, when things are supposedly earmarked for certain communities, and you get all your consultant fees and you get all these different fees, and then a very small percentage of the allocation gets to the people. So we've been very, very clear about specificity in the language and putting Black people to work. These contracts, we want Black contractors getting these jobs, because if we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars coming,
billions,
you know what I mean? Billions, you know what I mean? If we're not winning, if we're not getting any of that, we're going to be losing all over again. So I wanted
you're absolutely right. And I'm on appropriations committee. And every time I'm in a subcommittee meeting, whether or not it's labor, health, and other related issues, or it's transportation, housing, and urban development, when those secretaries come on board, come and talk to us, I ask them specifically about that. I talk to them about how we've always had these wonderful goals where we're going to do this for this community and that for that community, and then the money gets spent and nothing happens in those communities. We need to make sure that we have real-time accountability. Like I said to you earlier tonight, we need to be able to do course changes if, in fact, we're finding that something isn't happening the way it should. Now, President Biden has been really kind of vocal about a certain percentage of the resources that are coming out of the Build Back Better and even the infrastructure bill that will be used in underserved communities, because he knows we got to catch up there, as well as put us on an equal footing. We have to make sure that in the various departments where those programs roll out, that they're paying attention. They're paying attention to the state when the money goes down to the state, that the state has the proper folks out there doing the contract compliance and looking at the workforce. We need to be working with our unions who are telling us that they're ready, willing, and able now to really bring on minorities, because it's not about just a bunch of white folks getting jobs.
No.
And these are good paying jobs, and these are jobs that are going to help families to support their families and to live in decent homes and clean surroundings and nice neighborhoods, and send their kids to trade school or college or wherever they want to go, you know?
Right.
And I can't express to you just how excited I am about the prospects of this. I don't want to be there and not be vigilant on my watch, because I honest to God believe that this is that moment, that FDR moment, that New Deal moment. The only difference is that you're not going to see signs Blacks don't apply. You know, and so we just make sure, we got to make sure now, not only are they applying, but they're getting. And that's the jobs as well as the contracts. I know I personally had my conversation with Secretary Buttigieg around this issue in appropriations, because I know so much money is going to come out of there.
Yes.
And our good friend, my former mentor, Marsha Fudge, is the head of Housing and Urban Development.
Yes.
So I know where her heart is and what she's going to expect there to be.
And we're looking forward to meet with Secretary Fudge too.
Oh yeah,
we're looking forward to have that conversation too.
She's amazing. And then the Agricultural Committee in Congress is headed by a Black man. And so all the agricultural money that'll come out there, you know, there's going to be accountability back to that. And then there's the Homeland Security Committee with Benny Thompson, you know, and on and on and on. So for the first time in our history is coming together where this amazing legislative opportunity exists. And there is a diversity and there is a representation of us at the table that is unprecedented.
Right.
And in addition to us, I mean, we have our relationships with the Hispanic Caucus and the Progressive Caucus and the Asian Pacific Caucus, because we're all in this together.
Yeah, it's time. This is and I appreciate you for articulating that, because this is a moment in history that we have to capitalize on. And I absolutely thank you for taking this time out. I understand you have a hard stop. And what I really wanted to convey to our listeners and whoever will see the recording is that this is a unique period in history. And if we aren't demanding, we will have missed out on a literal generation changing outcome. Like this is a big deal. Environmental justice, housing matters. The air you breathe matters. The water you drink matters. The soil that your food is grown in matters. All of these things matter. And now there's a focus in our community where we're saying, wait a minute, no more of exploiting us for your political or financial gain. It is time for us to speak up and be the most vocal. There should not be any table about environmental justice where we're not the loudest and the strongest and the proudest, because we recognize that historic harms have been done. So I would like to take a moment and to thank you so very much, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, on behalf of the New Jersey State Conference NAACP Environment and Climate Justice Committee. This has been EJ Chats with the NAACP, and this is just the first. We're going to have a much bigger discussion in 2022. We absolutely thank you. Thank you so much for championing these important legislative initiatives for our people and for everyone. Because what we always say, anything that benefits Black people benefits everyone. So we're grateful for what happens, because when you fight with us, you're going to benefit. So come fight with us. So we thank you. So any last words before you head out, Congresswoman?
Well, yeah, I just want to thank you for convening this platform, this discussion, and I'm available to discuss other issues that I think are important to our community. But the NAACP is so vitally important here. I mean, you've got the tradition behind you, you've got the reputation, you certainly have the energy and the vision from on the national level and on the state level. So I thank you. And if anybody says to you or anybody else, well, how are we going to deal with this social spending now with inflation, everything else? We tell them there's nothing mutually exclusive about this economy growing and our spending money on people who are going to spend their money and create greater jobs and more opportunities. And it is time for us to fess up and to recognize that we have a responsibility for one another. So thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And we appreciate you. And we are still trying to get that student loan relief. So we're going to be screaming for that too, because all these things are hampering our community. And we need to full circle advocate on all levels, because we deserve life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness too, because we built this country. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to thank everyone who attended. Please feel free to share this video. Our job here at the NAACP is to educate you so that you can become your own advocate, because there's never too many voices. We need all the voices. We need to be loud. We need to be strong. We need to be educated. So thank you so much for helping to educate our constituents this evening. Thank you to all of our partners. Thank you to NWF for the support. Thank you to NAACP. Thank you to all of our partners around the community. This has been NJ, NAACP, EJ Chats. Everyone have a great evening. Peace. Thank you. The infrastructure bill was that left. Now Build Back Better is that right. And you need that combination to really complete this job. So we really have to become educated on this so that we can contact Congresswoman's counterparts and get this moved.